So, hello everyone. I am here today with one of my favorite Instagram influencers who I've been following for quite a while, and I've been super excited to do this interview. Her name is Geneva. Welcome, Geneva.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Allison, for having me on here.
I'm
I feel like flattered because I love your Instagram as well. It's amazing. Like everything that you post in terms of body positivity, dealing with the misinformation online I feel honored, honestly. I'm a huge,
Thank you.
I don't know, I don't want to say
awesome.
fan because I feel like I'd like to think of us as friends now, but yeah.
No, I'm so excited. I feel like we have so much in common. So your Instagram is Consciously Fit. So that's what I've been following for years. And then you recently started a business called Consciously Fit Bite. So all of the links are going to be down below, and we're going to go over everything. And I mean, the reason why I wanted to follow you is we do have very similar journeys. I mean, we have like the same starting weight, we have the same current weight. We're both vegan, and I've been dying to not just interview, but to talk to somebody else who's vegan, because no one in my circle is completely vegan. So I'm excited, and I just love how honest you are about your journey, about your setbacks, about how you got started. You shared a lot to do with your skin removal surgery, which I thought was fantastic and something that I've kind of played with, whether or not I'm going to do it, not do it. And so they're all things again, your journey is super, super honest, and I really appreciate that. So that's why you are here. So I'm super pumped. So I'm going to get into the first question. We're going to let things flow. So, like myself, you've lost a little over 100 pounds, yes? Roughly?
About 160.
About 100, okay? I'm a little off, 160. You've lost way more than me. Very impressive. And I vividly remember the weeks leading up to when I kind of finally made the change, got a trainer, different things that had happened. So I noticed that I had trouble tying my shoes. I started to realize how labored it was to go upstairs. I had a medical incident. I got diagnosed with epilepsy. I had all of these moments, and I wanted to know, did you have like a specific moment or a series of moments that kind of led you to make the decision to make such a drastic lifestyle change?
So for me, I grew up morbidly obese. From the time that I could remember, I don't remember myself ever being of a normal weight. And so I was 5 years old sitting in a dietitian's office with my parents crying and not really fully understanding what the implications of that was.
Mm-hmm.
By the time I hit 12, I was probably around 230 pounds. I'm 5'7" for reference, and I was 5'7" at that age as well. I had to remove an ovary due to severe PCOS. So again, I didn't fully understand what the implications of that was, which is infertility, right?
Yeah.
By the time I hit 16, I was pre-diabetic. I had hypothyroid, and I was dealing with endometriosis that led to like severe chronic pain issues, especially in the pelvic area. And to drown myself out of that pain, I used food and opioid drugs. So that were prescribed to me. So I used this entire victim mentality for a majority of my life. I felt that I was undeserving of love. I felt like it doesn't matter what I eat anyways. I don't deserve to feel good. You know, those types, that was like the story I was telling myself, which I believe kept me in that weight range to begin with. The turning point for me was when I was 19. The highest weight that I could record was 332 pounds. Sometimes that fluctuates within my posts just because I know at some point I was probably even bigger than that, but I never wanted to weigh myself at the time. And I had just finished going through my first relationship, which was abusive in nature. So I looked in the mirror that particular night of that breakup, thinking to myself, like, you don't know who you are anymore. You have no idea who you are. And then I guess this voice, I call it the higher self now. Maybe we'll get into that later. I'm not sure. It was a voice that said, you need to learn how to love yourself. You need to do something about this. And that's pretty much where the journey took off from that particular point in time.
That's what I didn't even know all of that. That's wonderful, because I do think that there is a link, especially with women. I've read a lot of research on it. A lot of like issues in childhood lead us to have low self-esteem. And I feel like I had a similar thing. I comforted myself with food, and I didn't feel like I deserved better for myself. Like it was almost like subconsciously I didn't think I deserved good health
Exactly.
and mobility, and it took age and different experiences for me to realize that I was worthy and that I was capable of making the change. And you kind of start to look down the barrel of your life and go, okay, well, if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? And it's only going to get harder, right? The older you get and the more weight you put on and the lower your mobility is.
Exactly. I think a like I had a bunch of setbacks since that point on. Like, don't get me wrong, I went through weight loss not knowing very much about it, so that in of itself was difficult. I mean, at the end of the day, I guess we are both of us have this vision of trying to kind of take down that misinformation, and kind of show people what the reality is, which is actually why I love your page, because we have a very similar vision in mind. But weight loss, in my opinion, is like 90% psychological and 10% physical. And the reason being is that you don't, and whether you're conscious of that or not, nobody becomes overweight or underweight without having some sort of psychological issue behind. And I'm not saying like you need to be dealing with severe mental illness, but to me, those are signs that you're escaping an emotion that you don't want to feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. What did you feel? So when you started, because you're talking about misconceptions, so I want to get into that. When you started on your weight loss journey, like what did you feel some of the fitness myths in the beginning where you're like, oh wait, that's wrong? Like what were, if you could pick out like 2 or 3 where in the beginning you're like, oh wait, I have to readjust this, like what I've been told isn't true. I need to kind of figure out my way through this.
Yeah. So when I started, I had no knowledge of nutrition, cooking, or I didn't have any friends that were fit either. Like a lot of the people in my circle didn't live healthy lifestyles, to say the least. And so for me, I decided to go on YouTube, like most people do.
Yeah.
And the first thing that I saw was you need to be eating 1,200 calories a day. And so for me, I started calorie tracking, and I didn't really exercise at the time yet, just because I was so overweight that you can't really start running off of your body not knowing what it's doing type of thing. So that's what I did. I went from eating probably 5,000 calories a day to eating 1,200 overnight. That was the biggest issue, I think, throughout the journey, because there's a lot of influencers kind of preaching that. And although I do believe calories in and calories out is the main way that you do lose weight, there's a certain limit. So for me, I actually developed a binge eating disorder that turned into a bulimic disorder because of that. And, that's such a severe restriction that in my head, I didn't realize that, I was overindulging before, and now I'm so heavily restricting, and I always felt the need to restrict even more and more and more, that in and of itself was an escape from an emotion, Mm-hmm. Your body goes through a starvation mode almost. It's your body, you have to trust it. It's intelligent, So it's such a shock to the body to go through something like that if you dip those calories way too low, that it's going to want to eat anything in sight, and anything that's like high in fat, high in sugars, processed, just so it can survive off the food that you're taking, because it's afraid right now that you're pretty much starving yourself. So that was probably the biggest issue for me. Another big issue was cutting out macronutrients. There's a lot of keto diets online. There's a lot of, I don't know, high carb, if you're plant-based, high carb, low fat.
Yeah.
And I tried them all of them. And it never works, because your body, it needs all 3 of them to function properly. And so we go back to that square one issue of binge eating. If you have that as an issue already, maybe you don't, but your body will want those macros, because I mean, it's energy, right?
Yeah.
So those are the 2 biggest ones. In terms of like training, I mean, I think that for me was a bit easier, just because I got professional help with that at some point. I was seeing personal trainers from a young age, so I already knew how to exercise and what to do and how slow to take it. But the biggest advice would be to, like, if you're really serious, seek professional help. Don't go online and believe everything that you see. Be so gullible to it because you're so vulnerable, or you feel
We're
like
desperate
I
for
need this
help.
now. Yes, you
Yeah,
know.
I completely agree with you, especially on the nutrition front. There is to restrict, and I am always a proponent of like gradual. Like I do sometimes ask my clients to track at the beginning just to get like a ballpark of like. Oftentimes you don't know. So when I started, I was going to Starbucks every day and getting. I remember a venti white mocha. I wasn't vegan at the
Oh,
time.
that was so good.
That's 500 calories a day.
Yeah.
And so when I saw that, when I tracked for 2-3 weeks and I saw that, I was like, okay, well, even if I go, like I started by going half sweet. I started by getting a grande. Like I didn't fully restrict. I just started kind of slowly. I'm gonna have this every other day. I'm gonna still eat that, but I'm gonna stick to like a better portion size. So I'm not a proponent of overly restricting because when I was younger, I did figure skating. I had the same issue. I was always the like bigger figure skater. So even though I was in good shape, I wasn't thin like the other girls. And I did for a while. I tried to really restrict my calories down to about, I think it was about 1,200 a day too. And I ended up binging because I would restrict for a week and then I would want. So I'm always a proponent of you could still eat, I hate the term bad food, but
Yeah.
when you do it, just enjoy it. Stick to the portion. I always make the joke about my love of Pringles. Like a Pringles, the serving size is 11 chips. Just take the serving size to the couch. Don't bring the whole thing. You don't have to eat the entire thing, but you can have a little bit. Whenever we over restrict or when we go on these diets where we're cutting things, you're not learning how to eat over time because none of this is sustainable. Like 1,200 calories
Absolutely.
is not sustainable, right?
Exactly. And I fall on the same ideologies. Like I think balance is the only way that you can sustain weight loss. So it's a little gradual steps that will lead you to be able to sustain, because it's not that big of a shock to your mind or your body, to do it in that particular way. But I like that you mentioned bad foods and good foods. There's a lot of that online too. And then people, especially I see this with carbohydrates more than anything. At one point in time, it was fats, to fear these carbohydrates, even like fruit nowadays, which is like.
Oh, I get that a lot. Sometimes when I tell people they should eat more fruit, they're like, yeah, but fruit has sugar. Yeah, but it also has all kinds of minerals and nutrients that you require. And again, I'm not telling you to go eat 12 apples. I mean, any food, too much of it is not good. But I think when you don't go the diet route, it might take you longer, but it will be sustainable. You'll actually keep the weight off. And also,
Exactly.
I think you learn how to manage your relationship with food. You get rid of this good, bad, like eat, restrict. And then, I could eat on a weekend. We rewatched Back to the Future. We're all nostalgic while we're stuck in the house. And, I had Pringles. I didn't feel bad about it. We made cookies then. Like when I do eat something that it's fun and I enjoy, I don't feel bad about it, but I also eat it within balance. I would have eaten 5-6 cookies before. I had 2. You know what I mean? It's all within balance. I worked out. I ate clean all week. I don't need to feel guilty about food anymore. You should be able to enjoy food as well.
Exactly.
Fun.
Absolutely.
It doesn't just need to be fuel. It's a social thing. Like I don't want my friends coming over for a barbecue, well, when they're allowed, and I'm sitting there only eating a salad while everybody else, you know what I mean? You want to enjoy.
That's so sad. Yeah.
Exactly. But I've seen that happen where my friends were, they're on diets or they're doing this. And it's like, yeah, but I kind of always instruct, like I plan my week. So I meal plan, which I know you do too. So that way, you're not caught off guard. You're not ordering out or stopping to pick something up. But also if I know I'm going to a barbecue on Saturday, I eat clean all week. And then on Saturday, I'm like, I'm going to just, to a point, but I kind of eat what I want. I eat clean all week. I'm going to eat what I want. I could relax. And I'm not the girl in the corner who works out too much and is always eating salad. I could kind of fit in. And then my like weight loss journey isn't always the focus, because that too I don't like anymore.
No, yeah, and then you become identified with that.
Yeah, Allison's always the one eating salad. She's always the one going for a run. I don't want to always be associated with my weight anymore.
I agree. How was that for you, by the way? I know for me in the beginning of my weight loss journey, and I started losing some weight, that's the only association people made with me, is the girl who lost weight. And then there's these expectations around it when you meet people, and
Yeah.
it's not I mean, I understand where you're coming from in terms of like not wanting to be associated with just that, just because you're much more than that, you know, like you're a human being, you're Allison at the end of the day, right? So
yeah, I mean, it's still a little bit, but a few people.
I mean, like we brand ourselves that way too, not brand ourselves, but I mean, the majority of the people who we want to target are people of that community. So
yeah,
it's understandable.
it's stranger when people within your circle, like maybe, you know, somebody you see maybe 2-3 times a year, like a friend's uncle or whatever, and they see you and they're like, oh my God, you look so, and I'm like, yeah, but I've kind of been this weight and looked like this for a while now. Like,
for a long time. Yeah.
Move on. But I get it. I think a lot of people struggle with their health. And so for some people, it's amazing to them, right? That like
right.
what we've done. I don't think honestly, I don't think what we've done is, I think anybody could do it. I just think we finally cracked the code. I don't think what I've done is that incredible. But I get why people find it inspiring. So I don't really take it, like it doesn't bug me anymore, but again, I don't want to also make myself the center of it either. Like I try to balance it, right? Like anything. Yes. You talked a bit about setbacks, which you talk a lot about on your Instagram, and I love. How do you deal with setbacks? Like, how do you reset yourself when you fall off the wagon, or whatever phrase you use?
So I think definitely at this point in time, I don't believe that I fall off any wagon, if that makes sense. I've reached a point where for me, if I feel like I need to have something, I'm going to have it and not feel guilty about it. However, you know, not even a full year ago, I was always dealing with I was still dealing with a bit of binge eating. So again, what I would do, let's say if I had something that I deemed like not the greatest for me, or I overate on calories that day or something, definitely I would say like compassion towards myself was the biggest thing, because beforehand that would just perpetuate like a bulimic episode for me. I don't know how else to call it, so I'm just going to say it that way. But with the use of compassion and seeing myself through the lens of love, I know that sounds kind of vague, that's what really helped me. And what I mean by that is whenever I would feel that guilt come up, the emotion of guilt, I would allow myself to feel it, and then I would allow myself to also feel that it was okay to do that it was normal, that I'm a human being, and I deserve to nourish my body today and not have to not eat at all or over exercise, etc. So compassion for me was a big deal. Journaling for me was also another big deal, because if I did something bad or had a setback, for me that meant, what that equated to was, what am I running from today, or what was I running from? Like, let's see what the bigger issue is. Because for me, like any bad behavior, which is, I believe all behaviors are neutral now, but any type of these destructive behaviors, if they occur, to me, it's just, again, like I said, I take this really as like a psychological process. It's just something that I learned to escape from. Like, it's just a behavior that I engaged with in the past to escape from something painful. So I need to get to the bottom of it, if that makes sense.
No, that makes complete sense. I always say you see it, you sit a lot on Instagram that weight loss or health, whatever, is 80% nutrition, 20% exercise. And I always say it's 100% mental, because you need to change your mindset. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, is you've changed your mindset and how you interact with yourself. You no longer judge yourself or get down on yourself when you, again, do something bad. I feel like this whole interview is going to be us being like bad. But again, we're trying to talk how the influencers talk, right? And dispel. And that is, I think, again, another reason why I wanted to interview you, because you've made a mindset shift. You're coming at yourself now from a point of loving yourself and realizing that, you know, it's something that happened. It's something I need to get to the bottom of. And I don't need to feel or get down on myself or feel bad about my behavior. It's come from love, kind of reset myself, and then walk forward. No, less guilt, I guess, less kind of hits.
Less guilt and shame. I think throughout our lives, anybody who's growing up with like a body shame or any type of shame for that matter, you grow up carrying that, and so you internalize it, and every time you think that you're doing something bad, it's as if like you come back to that shame. It's that same shame that you felt. This is gonna get very like esoteric, if like I guess it can, doesn't matter. I feel like a lot of the emotions that we feel today come from a past, especially childhood. And whether you think that it's not a big deal what you went through in childhood, like even something as little as a tiny punishment, like a slap on the hand for grabbing a cookie or something like that, something very like it seems innocent, that could impact you for the rest of your life. And how that happens is through like its action potential, like your neurons. Whenever something similar happens in your life today, or some emotion gets brought up that was a similar emotion of when you felt like when you were a child going through that little like situation, it's going to come up. And a lot of these emotions, you need to tackle them from back then. You really need to tackle them from back then. And like I'm aware that it's difficult for people. Like it's not an easy thing even to try to understand this, because we're so hardwired to think that weight loss is a mechanical process, and that things that happened in the past should be left in the past. But people aren't aware enough that anything that you feel today stems from a trigger from your past.
Yes. Everything you're saying makes me so excited.
Yeah. And I for me, that moment, like the moment of any type of mindfulness or anything like that, like I went through a lot of therapy. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like, it didn't just happen naturally for me. I made a conscious decision to want to change through going through therapy. I also studied, like I have a bachelor's in psychology. So a lot of the stuff that I learned in class resonated with me, and that's also something that I want to share on my Instagram. Like it's a lot of it is like, how do you go about that journey of trying to find that place of peace within yourself. There's a lot of I call it shadow work, but there's a lot of work to be done. You need to like pull out the weeds, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I feel like so much at the beginning of my journey was journaling, writing to myself, writing about like what were some of my habits, like how were they affecting me, getting down to the root of why they were there. And I didn't do a ton of therapy, but I did do some counseling, and I did have a major breakthrough too. And I did trace stuff back to my childhood. So I definitely had some shaming from my grandmother, who always wanted me to be thinner, and so she would be upset with me for being overweight, and then she would make me feel bad. And then it's funny because when I say it now, when I realized this in therapy, it was like, okay, well, this is why I'm a binge eater. She would feel bad about making me feel bad, so then she would go buy me treats. So then
that's the same situation with me. That's actually kind of crazy. Yeah, that's what it is. And so you develop that okay, comfort in the food, because in a way you were taught to find comfort in food,
yes,
right?
but at the same time, I always feel shamed about eating the food. So it was, so when I got older and I realized this, I go, well, no wonder I have a terrible relationship with food, because that's where it comes from. And definitely there's still so much work to do, but I find when you could get to the root of it, of whatever problem you're having, kind of know where it started, it's just a lot easier to start work on changing your script around it, because you actually know where it started. And when I realized where it came from, and I realized that it wasn't something that came from me, that, that this person in my life was in the wrong, it took a lot of the guilt and shame off of me. I was like, no, because too, I became a youth worker and I ran a teen zone. I was like, well, no, the shame isn't on me. It was the adult's responsibility to be better. And that's not my fault. And that's when I started to gain a bit more confidence, and okay, I can make changes. And again, this isn't really my issue. It was an issue that was placed on me, that I now have the responsibility. Again, I don't want to be a victim. I need to let go of it and figure it out. So I did counseling, and again, a lot of journaling, a lot of following other people with similar issues, and always thinking, meditating, all of that.
Exactly.
But you've got to get down into, you got to get down to what's in between your ears before.
100%, like absolutely. And that's amazing that you had that awareness to be able to come to terms with, oh, that's what happened, like not many people are willing to go through this process that we just spoke about. And I think that that's a big issue because with the misconceptions online, because nobody wants to hear what we're talking about.
Yeah,
Nobody really wants to
it's
go
hard to
through it.
sell. It's hard to
They
sell, but
want
it's not something you could do in 90 days for a bikini body, right?
exactly. And that's why I think like people are looking for the shortcut, the cutting of the macronutrients, the cutting of the calories, the this, the that, whatever. Because that just seems more logical to the human mind. But at the end of the day, this is what works for sustainability, you
Yeah.
know?
And too, for mental wellness as well, like you don't just want to be, you could be physically well, you could look physically fit and still be mentally unwell, right? So I think when you're addressing those issues too, you're working on yourself holistically, really, because
yeah.
thinness doesn't, and I mean, this is something else we could get into, like the reality of weight loss is kind of sold is that you're gonna look perfect and then you're gonna be perfectly happy, but that's not the reality of weight loss. Even once you lose 100 pounds, you still not might be happy with how you look. You still might be struggling with your eating. And so, like, what did you find shocked you once you had lost like a significant amount of weight? Were you like, wait a second, this isn't what the magazines told me was gonna happen? Because I know I had a lot of that.
I had a lot of that. Like for me, it was like not feeling full and happy the way that I thought I was going to feel after reaching a certain goal. I felt like, but this isn't enough. Like, why do I still feel like fat and ugly and stuff, even though I know like objectively that I'm not? And for me, that was a shocker because they paint that picture of beauty and you're gonna feel amazing as long as you hit this number, you're gonna feel like you accomplished a world. And that's still like really not the case, because again, it falls back to that if you were overweight to begin with, you're escaping something that you haven't tackled emotionally. And so that same feeling comes back down to when you hit that goal weight and realize, well, you know, I'm not happy because, and that reason why that happened is because you didn't tackle that emotion to begin with. You know, you went through the physical part of it, but you're never going to be happy until you pass that like psychological aspect of it. And that's when I actually started doing the work, because for me I didn't start the journey on a good note, you can say. Like, yes, the initial message, the turning point came from my higher self, like I like to say. But throughout the journey, I kind of got lost in that, okay, chasing that number, you know, without tackling the internal issues. The mindfulness only came afterwards at that particular point where I realized, well, it's not what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you realize you have to add things on. I mean, my journey wasn't exactly the same. I think I had a bit more of the mindfulness going through it. I think I struggled a bit more with, you know, they always show those before and after photos and the woman looks perfect. And then here I am with loose skin and cellulite, and like no matter how much weight I lost and like how strong my arms got, you know, I still have a bit of the flapping arm, and so that bothered me. And then I was upset that I even cared about it, because I had been on this, so I'm doing it for my health, but when you care about your appearance your entire life, it doesn't just turn off. Even if it turns off for a while, it's dormant, it's still there. And then I kind of amped up the mindfulness. So meditating, doing my gratitude jar, journaling more, seeking out content from other people who had lost a lot of weight and who were being honest. So yeah, there's definitely, you're not just going to lose the weight and be happy. You're not just going to lose the weight and look like, you know, they always show those before and after photos of someone like 400 pounds. They look sad. The photo's always kind of muted. And then they show somebody perfectly happy. And so you think that that's what's going to happen. But my first interview with Melissa Keller, we talked a lot about this as well. It's you're kind of sold like, okay, you needed to lose 100 pounds. You lose 100 pounds, journey over. And it's never over. Like, I believe I will always struggle with binge eating, and I don't think I'm going to go the next 30 years without binge eating. I think it'll happen and I'll get myself back on track and I'll address it. But I think it will always be there. I think it will always be somewhat of I think it gets easier now for me to address,
Absolutely.
but it's definitely it's never over. You need to play the long game, I think, when it comes to your health, especially coming from how we started.
Yeah, because that's so hard. The binge eating, for example, is so hardwired in you that that's the easiest way that we can seek comfort. So yes, it does become easier, especially with the whole meditation, mindfulness practices, but it's never over. I completely agree. Like even every single day is a conscious decision to take the higher path, and you need to constantly be working at that. Again, it does become much easier through time. The more you do it, the easier it becomes, but I also agree with you. Like, I don't think there'll ever be a point in time where I'm never going to binge eat again. It's going to happen. But what matters is the way that you cope with it.
Yeah.
You know? But in terms of the way that like it's painted on the media, you think that you're going to have this tight skin, that you're going to all of a sudden glow. And that's really, especially with weight loss over, I would say like 100 pounds, that's not the reality whatsoever.
No,
Whatsoever.
it's not. You did opt for skin removal surgery, and you did share that on your Instagram, which was super, super cool of you to do. How was that? Like, I don't even know where, it's something I've thought about. Like, what brought you to that decision? Are you happy you did it? Like, what was your journey with the skin removal surgery?
I feel like that journey in of itself was its own thing for how big of a deal it was and how many emotions came up for me. So I knew going into the journey that I was going to need it. Don't really need it. But I knew that it was gonna be a thing, you know?
Okay.
So I kept that in my mind, you know? But when I got to the point of having lost that weight and then, you know, not feeling happy, I also knew that that wasn't the right time for me to do it. Because I truly believe if you're going to go through with something as intensive as skin removal surgery, because I didn't have just a tummy tuck. For me, I had the body lift, so it went all around my body. It's an extensive surgery.
Yeah.
You need to be in a place where maybe, look, let's not sugarcoat this either, but like you can love yourself but be neutral towards the way that your body looks, because some people just, you know, for me it wasn't a possibility to just fall in love with every part of my loose skin, because there was so much pain attached to especially my pelvic area, because I dealt with so much chronic pain. For me, the loose skin removal surgery was a completion or feeling free from that pain. So I waited to a point where I got neutral. And I knew that that was a point when I would look in the mirror and not think that it was ugly. I would just be like, okay, like, you know, it doesn't really define me. And I was wearing like the clothes that I always wanted to wear without really caring what other people thought. That's when I knew I was ready. And that's when I proceeded with it. But that journey was fairly difficult, not only physically, but mentally too, because I also didn't know that I felt like I was undeserving of having that surgery. It's almost like an imposter syndrome, if you will. Like I didn't feel like, to me, it wasn't a big deal that I had done that. And so because I felt that way, I felt like I didn't deserve to actually feel like I look good anymore. Mm-hmm. And even with loose skin removal surgery, I still have loose skin. Like that's another thing that's being sugarcoated, is that you're going to get the surgery, you're going to look like $1 million. That's not true. You know, you have scars, you still have loose skin. There's certain areas that can't be removed, like your upper belly, you know? So I feel like I went through that again, mentally, the whole like expectation thing. Like I expected to look perfect, but I still have some loose skin. So like the reminder is there, you know? In terms of if you want, like, I don't know if anybody watching this, I know that you said that you treaded with the thought of kind of going through it.
I played with the idea, possibly, but I haven't entertained it a ton, to be honest with you, but I've considered it a little bit.
For sure. Most people do. For me, I would say if you're going to proceed with it, make sure that you're not doing it with the idea or intention of just looking good. You know, there should be like a reason behind it, in terms of like, is it stopping you physically, or, you know, even dysphorically? Like if that is there, come to a point where you're kind of neutral with your body and then go ahead with it. Because if you come from like this place of hate, it's not going to be resolved. Like the same way that it wasn't resolved when you had lost the weight and realized it wasn't what it was set out to be.
Yeah.
So that would be like my mini advice, I guess.
I love that though. Waiting until you're neutral, I think is such a smart, and I think it's because you developed that mindset already through the weight loss, that you had the wisdom to know that it would be better to wait. And again, it's not a fix all solution. I think that's why I haven't looked into it more. It's not impeding me physically. And so it's like, well, do I want to put myself through that? The downtime? I don't know. I'm not
There's
saying I'll never do it, but I don't feel the inclination to do it yet. But I think your advice for making the decision is very, very wise. I hadn't even thought of that. That's really a good way to look at it.
Yeah, it should. For me, it's just at the end of the day, make sure it's not 100% your aesthetics, because you're perfect. I believe that everybody is perfect as they are, like, because you're so much more than just that. So, it is an aesthetic surgery, right? So you just make sure that you're kind of neutral with yourself rather than coming from a place of hate. Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't want to backtrack either in your mindset, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I really like that. That's good. I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't sure, because again, I haven't looked much into skin removal surgery, and part of me, I don't know if I don't want to, or I just haven't been there. And so I was super curious. I kind of wanted to get your response fresh without me knowing too much, actually.
For sure. I actually also dealt with complications that lasted up until a month ago. So that it's almost a year it's 8 months of complications. I had openings, and I had to get surgery again to restitch it, and now the results aren't the same as they would have been. And from my understanding of going through with that, it's very common. So
okay.
Again, it's not a surgery where, it's not like a boob job where you bounce back right away. It's something that you make sure that you take a lot of time off and follow the guidelines, because complications are extremely common.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing, because a lot of people wouldn't share about that. So
I don't know if it's because I dealt with the complications physically and mentally that I would have shared that, but I felt like it was an important notice, just because I do have friends that are considering it, and I'm like, look guys, like, just make sure that you're doing this, from this place and not that place, and blah, blah, blah,
Yeah, and you need to know exactly what you're getting into, because it's not something you want to regret once it's done, it's done. There's no going back, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, this is going to be like a very, very hard turn. I no smooth transition for this. So let's just get into something I'm super excited to talk to you about. You are a fellow vegan.
I am, yes.
I really want to know, like, why did you switch to veganism? Then I have 100 other questions.
I would say I switched into veganism well in the beginning of my spiritual journey. So I would say a big portion of that was spiritual, but another portion of that was definitely health-wise. At the time, I was dealing with like blood sugar crashes, and like I would catch myself binge eating here and there because of those crashes. And I was eating mainly protein. So I was cutting out carbs. I was terrified of carbs. And I also wasn't fond of fat. So all I was doing was drinking like whey protein shakes and having some like chicken and turkey here and there. I always treaded waters with vegetarianism. Even when I was obese, I was not eating red meat. So it wasn't like a foreign idea to me. But
that was the first thing I cut out too, was red meat, long before I started my weight loss journey. Interesting.
Because a lot of people have the knowledge that red meat isn't good for you. But if you do a little bit of a deeper research, you'll realize that it's because of the cholesterol, the saturated fats, and the hormones that those animals carry with them.
Yeah.
So I didn't do any of that research at the point that I decided to become vegan, but I went to the doctors and he told me that I was pre-diabetic again. And at this point, I had lost over 100 pounds, so I couldn't really understand how that was possible, given that I was only eating meat. And which is kind of crazy in of itself. I also dealt with more cysts on the other ovary I have left, so things felt like it was just going backwards for me. And I would get these like vivid flashes of like bowls. I know it sounds crazy. I would get like flashes of like bowls of fruit, or like, nourished bowls that were vegan. It just popped into my head. And so I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm being guided a certain direction to heal. And around this time, I began meditating as well. I wasn't fully spiritual. I was getting there. And so I just kind of went vegan overnight. I don't really know how else to say it bluntly. It's not like I watched something or anything. I listened to my body, I guess you can say. And I never looked back. I never felt better within 2 weeks. I was no longer pre-diabetic. Within a year, I no longer deal with PCOS. And for health reasons, it did wonders. And yeah.
Yeah, I not everybody likes to hear this, and I mean, I'm vegan on my platform, but I don't overly do it, especially with clients, because not everybody's going to go plant-based, and I don't want to just single myself out as like the plant-based trainer. But to me, it was so significant in my journey. And I actually went originally more for what I call moral reasons. And so I did watch some things. I went kayaking with orcas in Vancouver, and I had this like visceral reaction that I felt like I was harming other living things. And that led me to making the change. I didn't do it overnight though. I did do it slowly. So from like September to January 1st, I kind of cut this out, cut that out. Red meat I'd cut out for years before, but I did it very slowly. And then obviously I saw all the health benefits too. I felt my mind was clearer. I felt more energetic. I found I had less like digestion problems.
Agreed.
But I also felt like I had a real, this like new mental clarity. Like you're calling it spirituality, but I just feel like I'm in this better like oneness with everything.
Like union, with everything. And I think that goes down to morality, because I wouldn't have stayed vegan or plant-based, because I guess at the time when I went vegan, it was plant-based because there wasn't that morality aspect attached to it. I just started to inform myself more on it, and it like hit me hard that, like, for me, I live with the philosophy of like this oneness, compassion, like we're all interconnected. There's no difference between me, you, the animal, whatever. I think it's very important. That's like a fundamental thing for me. So if I were to eat animals that dealt with fear, anger, not anger, rather fear, sadness, that went through torture, I was putting that into my body as well. And I was also perpetuating it from happening. So like making sure that it happened again if I were to continue eating it or buy into those products. And that's when I think I made that conscious like switch, like this is for life. It doesn't matter how. There's always where there's a will, there's a way. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is like there's a lot of misinformation with veganism in terms of like the high carb, low fat movement. I actually started off high carb, low fat because, again, I didn't realize why I was cutting out macros because, it's a form of restriction. It was realizing that no matter which way I go about it, because you can cut off macros, you can do this, you can do that with any diet, really.
Yeah, for sure.
And I realized like balance was the ultimate key, and I could do that with a plant-based diet. I don't really need to go back to eating meat, which is where a lot of like people kind of fall off veganism. I find like they start off sticking with a really restrictive diet and think that eating meat is the solution when it's really not. Balance is the key.
Like anything else, right? You need balance even in a vegan diet. I mean, you could be a junk food vegan, you could be a raw vegan. I like to kind of be in the middle. But yeah, I can never state enough how almost like freeing I felt with it. How, like,
the word attached to it is freedom. I completely agree. I feel
like I'm making this positive choice every day, and I'm like fostering this good karma, kind of. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I feel like I'm in better tune with the environment, because I do think it's an environmental decision, which I think is the main issue of our time.
Absolutely.
Like I'm very, very like pro environmentalism. I try to really lessen my impact on the environment. I feel like it was all really interconnected. Like when I started to love myself more and I took my health into my own hands, it then freed me up to think of, well, how do I steward the planet around me? Because I could be as healthy as I want to be, but if the planet is unhealthy, I will eventually be unhealthy. And
absolutely,
if I want certain things for myself, feelings of happiness, if I don't want to live in fear, I can't subject other living beings to those feelings either. And so I just found it I feel like it's a super empowering decision. And I feel like it's all that it's done is driven me forward. And so I love talking about it, and I love just kind of encouraging people, meatless Mondays, just, not everybody has to be vegan for sure, but you could do, if everybody just had a few more meals a week, imagine the impact
it would be an incredible impact. My partner too, he treaded waters with veganism, but for the most part now he's plant-based. And I feel like not only for yourself, but for everything around you, like you don't necessarily have to be vegan, because I understand that for some people, like they believe they have like these mental blocks. I don't want to say that, but towards actually, turn towards a vegan diet, but reducing your intake of meat makes a humongous difference. I say humongous.
Yeah.
It's because it makes such a big difference. So like meatless Mondays, I encourage it. That's what I try to do on my blog too. I put a bunch of recipes. They're all well-balanced vegan meals, but it's for anybody to go on there and just kind of, oh, today I feel like having a vegan meal. What can I eat? Or like what snack can I have? That doesn't, include a whole bunch of processed stuff,
Yeah. Yeah. I found too, for me, and this kind of leads me into my next question. I found going plant-based forced me to have to relearn how to cook, which Absolutely. Is really what I needed. I needed to learn how to cook, because pre-fitness journey, I was doing a lot of like Delissio pizzas. I was buying like those pre-cooked chickens and like potato salad on the side, or those pre-made Caesar salad. Like that was my healthy meal, was like the pre-made Caesar salad with the chicken. I was doing a lot of the frozen fish, or those frozen like President's Choice lasagnas. It was all processed. And then when I went vegan, and I went vegan 3.5 years ago, I mean, the difference between what's available now to 3.5 years ago is, the amount of restaurants, the amount of food just available at like a regular Provigo or a Maxi, or even like Super C. The fact we have a herbivore shout out vegan. Yeah. I love that grocery store, because I love
my favorite,
and not have to read. Like I don't have to like look at these little ingredients, but it forced me to relearn how to cook, and I now absolutely love to cook. Like my office is in my kitchen. I have all my vegan cookbooks, and I just love it. So you obviously love cooking. You've started now I'm going to mess it up. I don't want to mess it up. Consciously Fit Bites, which is vegan treats. So you market them as like post workout treats. I feel like I would eat them watching a movie too, though. They look delicious.
And they're pretty much just like healthy snacks to have. They're not a complete meal. I market them as pre and post workout just because like that's the vision I had in mind. But cooking in general, I think was super important. Like probably the most important physical aspect of it, I guess. I don't know if I would say physical, but behavioral aspect, because you're trying to change habits when you're embarking on a weight loss journey. That's what you're pretty much doing. I didn't know how to cook prior. That's for sure. I was only eating whatever my Italian grandmother made or what my Turkish father made, and that was often just like a whole bunch of oil and sugar mixed together. So anything quick and fast, I always gave myself those excuses of like, I don't have enough time, right? Yeah. But it's a huge part, because when you learn how to cook, you're learning what actually goes into your body, how you can control that. And I don't want to make this an entire thing of control, but you're becoming more conscious, I guess you can say, of everything that goes into your body, of how to cook, what flavors go well together. You build this like curiosity. It's almost fun. And I think it's really important to think about it that way too. Especially as somebody who went from really not liking to cook into loving it, you need to approach it with a curious mind. How can I make this taste better? How can I make this as healthy as possible while still enjoying it? So huge part of the journey, and learning about nutrition too. It goes like hand in hand.
Yeah, you do that. I also found, for me, I don't know if this was true for you, but I found I started to eat more mindfully, because when you spend time making a meal, you want to enjoy it. I wasn't kind of like shoveling it into my mouth like I would say Delissio pizza and then like unconsciously overeat. I find it made me a lot more conscious of what I was putting in my body, because the ingredients going in. I also think there's something very cathartic of experiencing food and working with your food, then it too often food is something, it's like an afterthought. It's like, I don't have time for it. It's like, how do the fact that we view fitness and nutrition as something we don't have time for, when we require our bodies to move through life, like not everything else you prioritize over fitness and food is not possible if you're not healthy. And I
Exactly.
think it's one of the biggest crimes of our society is that we work ourselves and busy ourselves to the point where we don't have time to take care. I always call it, it's a machine. It's like a car. You know,
Yeah.
we bring our car in for a tune-up. I always joke, like, you wouldn't just put any oil into a car, right? You get the right oil for your
Yes.
car so it works properly, and that we should view our bodies as that too. And I found when I started to have to cook for myself, my priorities started shifting and where I put my time started shifting. And so that was a big key factor. I'm a big proponent of cook with your family. I have friends over and we make meals in bulk. Make it a social activity if that's what you have to do, meal prep plan, but food should be one of your top priorities for the week, in my opinion.
Yes. No, I completely agree. I think the same exact way. Like, if you feel like you're going to embark on this journey and you're doing it with the intention to love yourself, you want to make sure that you're nourishing every aspect of it, and to build that positive association. Like, I feel like it builds that connection, knowing that, you're loving yourself while making this meal, and it definitely does create a lot more mindfulness while you're eating it. Absolutely. So
Yeah, cooking is good. Oh my God, I feel like we're so we're so on the same page.
yeah.
So you do like to cook. Did your cooking love kind of come from when you went plant-based, from like me having to kind of relearn, or it was a bit before that?
It probably was a bit before that, but becoming plant-based made me a lot more creative, finding new ingredients, superfoods, things of that nature, and how to really deal with them. I always say that I coddle my food now in terms of when I make it. Like, I didn't really do that before, I would just kind of shovel things together because I'm like, okay, well, this spice goes well with this meat. Like, let's do that and have some vegetables on the side. And it was always kind of like a repeat thing. It was always like, how am I going to dress it differently? But becoming plant-based, it's like, what kind of new ingredients can I use?
Yeah.
How can I make this more creative, more colorful, more palatable? Like, it's just, it becomes
I
different.
love that you said that, because let's just dispel one vegan myth right now. I get a lot, people are like, what do you eat? Like, you must be limited in what you eat. And I find I eat a much greater variety of foods than I ever ate when I wasn't vegan, when I was, I guess, omnivore. I eat weird stuff. I mean, if you look at my cupboard, I have every kind of bean you can imagine. I've got flax, I've got tempeh. I mean, I didn't know what a jackfruit was before I went vegan.
Either.
I didn't eat, like, I love Indian food now. Never ate Indian food before. I eat a lot of Mexican food because both of those are pretty friendly. If you're going out, you can find a vegan option on the menu.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I eat such a more spices. Before it was like salt and pepper.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, I have a cupboard. Spices will literally fall out at you if you open the cupboard. It's so different. So that is such a myth that we only eat like tofu and beans, when really there's so much that we could do, and it does allow you to be creative and discover new places and recipes.
For sure. For me, I definitely think it definitely reignited that extra curiosity I had towards cooking and creativity. It's every time I get in the kitchen now, I get super excited about what I can make to, like, how can I use my creativity? It's almost therapeutic, if you will.
Yeah,
very
therapeutic. Zone out. Yeah. So is that why you decided to start your new business, Consciously Fit Bites, which I'm super excited to order? So is my husband. I showed him some photos on Instagram.
That's so cute. That's in part why I decided to create Consciously Fit Bites. I think in the long run, what my vision is I was supposed to become a personal trainer, but due to the current circumstances, I can't really go through with that at the moment. But my whole brand idea was to remain consciously fit. Consciously Fit Bites is just like another aspect of it. It was to pretty much show people how delicious, protein packed, plant-based treats could be. It's not always boring. Like, a lot of the snacks out there are just like granola, dried fruit, and nuts. You know, I wanted to make it fun. I want to show people how fun it can be, how delicious it could be without having to use like whey protein, for example, especially for the population of people who work out a lot.
Yeah.
They'll fall susceptible to using those types of protein powders. I wanted to kind of change that direction for people. So yeah, definitely that too sparked my creativity, because I get to make these little like balls of deliciousness and kind of dress them up in a really cute manner. But the end vision is definitely to pair that with personal training and mindset training and things of that nature. Just because I think it's really important to have personal trainers like yourself. You preach about it a lot too, like this whole mindset notion. There's a lot of trainers out there who disregard that completely, you know? And I think for a change to occur, there needs to be more personal trainers or fitness well-being coaches like you and I who do agree that there is a big portion of this coming from psychological well-being, overall well-being.
Yeah, we have to, especially in this day and age, we have to address mental health at this at the same time as physical health. Again, it's all one. Everything is interconnected, and we can't overlook one. You can't do one without the other, because I think what we should be striving for is to be happy, as happy as we can be. And I think happiness comes from having a fit body and mind, feeling mobile. You'll feel more confident, and it's really all interconnected. And when we're addressing one without addressing the other, you're always going to be missing something, always.
Exactly. And that's pretty much why I guess I just started the Instagram page to begin with, even just a food blog. That was what the goal in mind, you know, was to really show people that you need all aspects of it to come into unison, just so that, you know, you can succeed and you can do it and you are capable of doing it, you know?
Yeah, I think too, as women, we have a bit of a responsibility. At least that's why I started mine. Well, I think I started mine to feel accountable too. I felt like when I was starting at the beginning, like the first 6 months putting my journey online, I did feel an accountability. But now I feel, I mean, I use it somewhat to promote my business, but I also always feel like I have come this far, and I should be my responsibility to kind of reach my hand down and help the next woman up too, especially because we're still so bombarded with bullshit fitness myths and quick fixes that I think it's admirable, you know, that people share their story and help the next woman up.
Absolutely.
So I have one last question I ask it to everybody, and it is, if you could give just one piece of advice to a woman starting on their health journey, what would it be?
To make sure that you're doing it with the intention to love yourself. Because when you have that particular intention in mind, it becomes much more than just aesthetics, and you're not going to want to take the shortcuts. You're going to want to learn and discover about yourself, you know? I fundamentally think that it comes down to that. If you love yourself, you're capable of loving everything around you much more than you think that you are. And the only limit you have is yourself, your mental blocks. There's nothing else in the world stopping you. We're all capable. It doesn't matter where you start from. You are absolutely capable of doing it.
100%. Thank you so much for coming on. I had so much fun talking to you. I feel like I'm talking to a younger version of myself. I feel like we're so on the same page with so many things. It made me super excited. I feel like I have 100 more questions. So maybe we'll do another one. We're both in Montreal. Maybe we could be in person next time.
I hope so. And hopefully one day we can train together too or something. That would be super cool.
Definitely. I'm going to keep following you. And again, all of your links to everything will be at the bottom for more information. Check out Consciously Fit, links below on Instagram. Thank you everyone for watching. Bye.
Thank you. And thank you for having me on here, Allison. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.